So this week we are starting a new series I'm calling God Questions. And we're going to be looking at some of just sort of fundamental questions around God and faith and Christianity. And I'll just confess at the outset that I have never actually tried to teach a series quite like this. I've taught on some of these ideas in different settings, but I've never tried to do it in this kind of a setting, like as part of a sermon series. And so, buckle up, right? We're just going to have fun with this, I hope, but it's going to be a little bit different. But my hope is that as we hear these questions, these are going to be questions that you've asked yourself. You know, that these are questions that probably all of us at some level have wondered. Maybe we've thought it consciously, or maybe we've heard other people ask the questions, but maybe there are some of you, these are real questions that you're wrestling with even today. And I got to tell you, the way I came up with these questions, I know these are real questions. I know these are questions that people actually ask because, one, these are questions that I've asked. These are questions that I've wrestled with in my life, but also I asked Google, and Google told me that these are questions that people ask. And so I know these are questions, and maybe some of you, these are questions that you're wrestling with today. And maybe for some of you, you've wrestled with these and you kind of know what you believe, but you're maybe not real confident with why you believe what you believe. And so let me just say, right at the outset, let me be perfectly clear that my goal in this is not to prove that Christianity is true or that God is real. Because there are all sorts of things, the reality is there are all sorts of things that we believe, that we know to be true, that we can't prove. So for example, I believe that all of you have minds. I didn't say brains, I just said mind. No, I believe all of you have minds. You believe that I have a mind. I'm not an illusion, I'm not, a robot. Like, I have a mind. I believe all of you have minds. That's a reasonable belief to have. I believe that my memories are real. That I didn't just, this moment, sort of like burst into existence and someone uploaded memories to make me believe that I have a past. I believe that my memories are real. I believe that Julius Caesar lived. Right? See, there are all sorts of reasonable beliefs that we all have. We all share those beliefs, and we can't prove any of them, and yet if we didn't believe them, we'd all think there was something pretty weird and strange about us, correct? So there are all sorts of things that we can't prove, and so my goal isn't to prove Christianity. I can't prove that God is real. I can't do that in the way that I can demonstrate that 2 + 2 = 4. But what I hope to do is to show you that faith makes sense. I hope to show you that believing in God isn't like believing in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy that hopefully you've outgrown. And if I just ruin that for someone, I'm so sorry. Right? So our faith is reasonable. Like, I want to show you that our faith is reasonable, but not only reasonable, but actually that what we believe about God and what the scriptures reveal as truth actually fits better with our understanding of reality. And what we know of the world, what we know of ourselves, than not believing. And so the first question that I want to let us kind of wrestle with a little bit this morning is, does God exist? This is one of those fundamental questions that we ask at some point, or maybe you've asked Google, like, does God exist? And the short answer is yes. You're welcome. We can go home now. Now, see, here's the problem. See, if I can't prove that, then just answering, does God exist, doesn't really do a whole lot. And so I want to reframe the question, if I can, to say, how do we know God exists? Like, can we know that God exists? Is it reasonable to believe that God exists? And almost 2,000 years ago, a man by the name of Paul, you might have heard of him, the Apostle Paul, in a letter to the church in Rome, he had some really fascinating, deeply profound things to say about both how we know and not know God. That we can know and not know God almost at the same time that he exists. Because the real issue with knowing that God exists is less about the evidence and it's more about us. And so here's what he says in chapter 1 of Romans. He says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse." Now, we're going to come back to the men are without excuse part in just a few minutes, but first, I just want you to look at Paul's central idea. His big idea here is that creation, the natural world and the universe, points to the existence of God. Now, throughout history, for centuries now, there are Christian thinkers who have taken this idea that Paul lays out here, that creation points to a creator as a launching pad, if you will, for considering how the reality of the material world points to the reality of God. So, for example, in the 13th century, there's a very, very brilliant philosopher. His name is Thomas Aquinas. He's one of my favorite philosopher theologians. And Aquinas is incredibly brilliant and incredibly influential. And as he looks and observes nature, he lays out 5 arguments. He derives 5 arguments for what he sees in nature about the existence of God. And so the 5 arguments, he has the argument from motion, the argument from causation, argument from contingency, argument from gradation, and argument from design. Now, I don't have time to unpack all 5 of those. We'd be here for quite a while. So you can Google that later, and you can unpack these as much as you'd like. But let me tell you a bit about a couple of them, okay? Just to give you a flavor. So the first one that Aquinas begins to unpack is the argument from motion. This is where he begins. And see, long before Isaac Newton, remember him? Long before Isaac Newton had his first law of motion, that nothing acts unless acted upon, Aquinas was way ahead of him. And Aquinas noticed that when he looked at the natural world, that there is nothing that is in motion that was not first pushed into motion. Something moved on something else in order to create movement. So, for example, maybe you're going to go home today and watch football. And let's say as you turn on the TV, in that moment, you see a football flying through the air. You are not thinking, that football just spontaneously launched itself into the air. It is just flying in motion by itself. No. You go, well, someone kicked that football. So Aquinas, he says, look, everything in nature is that way. Everything that has motion was first pushed into motion. And so he says, if you take that back far enough, all the way back to the very beginning of reality itself, he says, then you have to have an unmoved first mover. That something or someone who first put everything into motion to create the chain reaction that we are still experiencing today. And Aquinas says, that unmoved first mover is God. Now, if you don't believe in God, well, you could very quickly, you might be thinking even right now, you're like, I don't need God to put everything into motion. That's what the Big Bang did, right? So the Big Bang, the explosion that creates the universe as we know it, and it launches everything, and it puts everything into motion. Huge explosion of energy, all motion begins, and so we're just sort of running on that motion. But Aquinas, he's ahead of you. And he says, yeah, it's funny though, for the Big Bang to exist, there has to be something before the Big Bang. Because something can't come from nothing. And the Big Bang is something. And something can't come from nothing. Everything that exists in the material world has to have a prior cause. This is the argument from causation. So imagine for a moment, you're sitting there right now, and you're sitting in the pew, and you look over, and in the aisle, there's a bunny rabbit. Your brain does not look at the bunny rabbit and think, that bunny just spontaneously popped into existence, right? We don't see that. We don't see things in our world just popping into existence around us, right? You would look at the bunny and think, where did that bunny come from? Came from somewhere. And if you trace the bunny back far enough, what do you get? A mommy bunny. But if you keep going back and back and back and back all the way to the beginning of reality itself, you find that there has to be an uncaused first cause, right? The unmaterial, something, someone who first created, who caused all that is in existence to exist. And Aquinas says that uncaused first cause is God. Let me give you one more from Aquinas. This is the argument from design. This is also called the teleological argument, if you want to sound fancy, which I do. And so the teleological, it has to do with like the end for which something is made, its purpose, its function. And so Aquinas, he looks at the world, he looks at all the functionality, he looks at what seems to be purpose behind what exists, and he says, man, it sure seems like this whole universe was made with intention. It was made with design. It was made on purpose. Now, Aquinas, he was just beginning to scratch the surface of this idea of design, and he has some really deep, amazingly complex arguments around design. But I got to tell you that in our modern world, we actually see this all the more clearly. In modern physics, for example, physicists will tell you that the very possibility of our universe existing is dependent upon these cosmic constants that have to be perfectly calibrated for the universe to exist and for life to be possible. So there's these multiple constant, cosmic constants. For example, there's the gravitational force, the electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, the rate of expansion in the universe, the velocity of light, the ratio of masses for protons and electrons, planetary mass, all of these things and more that have to be perfectly calibrated, because if any of these constants were off by the slightest degree, the universe couldn't exist and life wouldn't be possible. And the probability of those constants being what is necessary to be this precise, the probability is so infinitesimal, so minuscule as to be statistically impossible. So Roger Penrose is a mathematician and physicist, and he calculates the possibility of these constants being exactly what was possible or necessary for the universe to exist by chance, right? Would be 1 in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. Now, I don't do math, as I've made no secret about this. I can tell you that is a very, 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 very big number. Or a very tiny one, depending on how you're looking at it. Very tiny, tiny, tiny chance. Like if you tried to write this number out, you would not ever finish. Like that number is so extreme that even physicists who don't believe in God have looked at it and said, we have no explanation. Even physicists who do not believe in God have had to admit that in this universe, for the constants to be that precise, all at the same time, for the universe to exist and for life to be possible, it's almost as though it was done on purpose. Now, what they'll also say, because there's a reason that not every physicist believes in God, right? You have to have an argument against this, right? And so what they'll say, though, is that's only true. Well, it's true in this universe, but that's because we're only living in one universe, and there's actually a lot. So what a skeptic will say, looking at this, they'll say, look, it's totally true. It's totally true that for our universe to exist the way it is, the probability is statistically impossible. Like there's no chance for that. But we don't live in just one universe. We're actually part of a multiverse. That when the Big Bang exploded, there were millions, zillions, infinite number of universes. And so we're not talking about one universe that just happened to get it right. We're saying that of all these millions and zillions of universes, there was just one. You know, you've got all these different constants, and in every universe, every possible universe that exists out there, some of them, got this constant, some of them got that constant. None of them got that right because it was just statistically impossible, except just maybe there was just this one universe that got all of them right, and that's why we're here. And so we happen to be in the one universe where all the constants were actually perfectly calibrated for the universe to exist and for life to be possible. Now, I don't mean to be skeptical, but it does seem a little convenient. And I'm not the only one who's thought this. Brighter people than I have thought this long before I did. And so let me give you just one way of maybe thinking about this. Alvin Plantinga, He's a philosopher in Notre Dame, and when he looks at the multiverse argument for why all the universe exists, the universe that we exist is the way it is, the possibility of that and the chance of that, on the one hand, you can't argue that it's not possible. Like, it is possible that we are part of a multiverse and we just happen to be in the one universe. Again, I can't prove to you that that's not true. But what Plain Thing says, he says, imagine that you are playing cards with some friends. Or maybe not friends. You're just at a poker game, okay? And there's somebody, and he's dealing the cards out, and he deals himself 4 aces. You're like, wow, that's amazing. Like, you got really, really lucky, my friend. And so he wins that hand, he takes the pot, and then he deals again. Second time, another 4 aces, just to him. All right, at this point, you're like, wait a minute. That's a little suspicious, right? But he's like, wow, I can't believe it. This is incredible. I have no idea how this is possible. And then he deals again, and he gets, guess what? Another 4 aces. Now, back in the Old West, this would get a man shot, right? Like, at that point, somebody's pulling a revolver, is like, you're dead, you know? But what if, like, you're sitting at that table, you're reaching for your revolver, and he goes, whoa, hold on. Before you shoot me, understand that I know this looks bad, but you have to understand, we are actually part of a multiverse. And we just happen to be in the one universe. I can't explain it, but we live in the one universe. I know it's incredible. The one universe where every time I deal, I get 4 aces. Now, even if you couldn't prove that he was cheating, you would shoot that man, right? I see, even if you couldn't prove, like, that would look really suspicious. See, if you look close enough at the universe, at some point it stops looking like chance and it starts looking like a conspiracy, like it was done on purpose. All right, back to Paul. So here's Paul. And he says, look, the universe, it points to God so that men are without excuse. In other words, he says, look, when you look at the universe, you can't not see God. Which, if you don't believe in God, I realize may sound a little offensive. Now, if you don't believe in God, you're probably thinking, I don't know God exists. Like, if I knew God existed, I'd believe in God. I don't believe in God. I don't see God. Like, I don't know that. So Paul, what are you saying? And here's what I want you to see. That while nature points to God so you can't not see him, what Paul wants us to understand is that you can lose the ability to recognize God even when you do. So look back at verse 20. He says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. Like, you're seeing them. It's not a question of whether you see them, it's whether you recognize them. Being understood from what has been made so that men are without excuse. Verse 21, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Now, that sounds pretty bad, but I want to actually take us one step further because it gets worse. What Paul wants us to see is that this futility of our thinking, our inability to recognize God, and the darkness of our own hearts, he says this is actually self-inflicted. So if you go back right before this, verses 18 and 19, he says this, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who, get this part, suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. And here's the phrase I want you to hold on to. They suppress the truth. And I'm not going to say they, I'm going to say we. We suppress the truth. So have you ever wished that something wasn't true that was true? You ever see something you're like, this is true, but I want to deny it. Like, I'm going to live in denial. I refuse to believe that this could be true. That's how I felt watching the end of the Phillies game. That last one, man. Like, I'm watching that, and I'm like, no, this didn't just happen. Right? You want to live in denial. There are things that are true that we wish weren't true. But it's actually really hard to pretend that most things that are true aren't, right? Like you might have something happen in your life, you're like, I don't want to believe that that's true. Like if your girlfriend breaks up with you and you're like, no, I don't want to believe that's true. Like you can tell yourself that, but it's going to get awkward, right? Probably a restraining order in your future, right? Like there's things that we're like, I don't want this to be true. I'm going to pretend this isn't true. And then reality sort of punches you in the face. But there are some things that we're really good at pretending aren't true that are true. And it's especially those things that are true about us, about habits in our own life, about patterns in our lives, about attitudes that we have, about actions that we take. There are all sorts of truths about ourselves that we don't want to believe. We don't want to recognize. You ever had somebody who finally has the courage and who cares about you and loves you enough to tell you the truth about yourself, and it turns out you've been living in denial for years? Like you've had an anger problem your whole life, and the whole time you're like, no, I'm cool, I'm good. You know what, I'm just passionate. Like you're living in denial, and then one day somebody says, no, listen to me, you have an anger problem, and it's like the lights turn on. See, prior to that moment though, like that lie that you were living, that you didn't have an anger problem, it was so real to you. It was like you believed that lie so sincerely. Understand, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like the truth. See, Paul, he's really not being patronizing here, right? He's not saying, come on, you know God's real. Like, stop pretending. You're just pretending. Like, stop lying to you know the truth. He's not saying that. No, what Paul's saying here is that there is a lie that all of us, to some degree, we have believed so sincerely, so deeply that it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like the truth. And the lie is that we don't need God. That we are just fine without him. That if he's not part of this world, if he's not part of our lives, it doesn't matter. Life in the world would be just fine without him. See, this is what he's getting at back in verse 21 when he says, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. See, when you withhold gratitude to someone, it's as though you're saying they don't exist. Like imagine that you are, maybe you've got a project at work, and you and a team, you do this group project together, you do this whole presentation, and it goes, brilliantly, and then at the very last slide of your PowerPoint presentation, it's like, here's everyone who is involved in the project, and you leave someone off. What you're saying is, they don't get credit. You're not giving them their glory, if you will. You're not expressing gratitude to them. It's like they don't exist. They had nothing to do with the project. It's why we teach our children to say thank you. It's not just good manners. It's because children, like all of us, have a propensity to think that they are the only person who exists in the universe. And so we teach them to say thank you, because when you're saying thank you, you're acknowledging that there is someone else who exists besides you, and that person has helped you, they've contributed to you, they've come alongside you, they've cared for you, they've loved you. See, when you withhold gratitude, when you withhold credit, what you're saying is, I exist, you don't. Everything that I am, all that I've done is a credit to me and not to you. And see, when we withhold credit, glory, gratitude from God, we're saying the same thing. We're essentially saying, God, you don't exist. I exist. All that I am, I did. My very existence is me. Like, I'm here. I don't need you. I can get through my life without you. All the good things in my life attributed to me. Thank me very much. God, I exist. You don't. And what Paul's saying here is that not only is this rude at a cosmic level, he's saying that we're living a lie. We're living as though God doesn't exist, and it feels true. We live it so well. We believe it so deeply, but we're living a lie because we're living as though God exists. while we're pretending he doesn't. And you might think, I'm not living like God exists. Sure you are. Let me give you a couple of examples. The first is this. You believe, I don't even have to know you, and I can tell you this is true about you. You believe that there is such a thing as right and wrong. And you might want to argue with me and say, no, I don't. I think that right and wrong is just subjective, like we just sort of invented it. No, you don't. And I know that about you because you get upset when someone cuts you off in traffic. You're not offended when someone runs the stop sign because that was a law that Hainesport put in place, or that the traffic department, or the government said, you shouldn't run a stop sign. No, you're offended because it involved you. Like if somebody cuts you off or somebody runs a stop sign right in front of you, like that's wrong. Like you shouldn't do that. How dare you? Right? We feel it in the depths of our being. Like there are some things that are simply wrong. But see, without God, all morality, and that was a silly one, right? Somebody cuts you off in traffic. All morality, murder, cheating, lying, like all these things that we say, don't do those things. Genocide, human rights, right? This idea of the equality of all human persons, like all of those ideas, like those are moral ideas. And without God, all you can say at best is that they are social constructs. That as a society, as a civilization, as people even, that we have agreed that these will be our morality, that we will agree that these things are what constitutes right and wrong. And the problem is that social constructs can change. So that what we might agree is wrong, but then give it time, and we'll change our minds. See, right now, we are living in a society that we have deep, deep divisions over morality, over what is wrong, right and wrong, right? Deep-seated division over issues like gender and sexuality and abortion, and those are moral issues. And see, without God, then who's to say? Like it's just a matter of personal preference. It's a matter of political expediency. It's a matter of power, who gets to decide. See, if we want right and wrong, good and evil, if we want to say that it actually means something, for it to actually be true in an objective, transcendent, timeless sense, in the way that we want to say something is wrong, where we say, no, that's not just wrong because we all agreed it's wrong. No, it's wrong. Like even if nobody agreed that it was wrong, it'd still be wrong. Even if everybody in the world said it's right, I know it's wrong. If we want to be able to say it that strongly, you can't say that without God. You have to have a transcendent moral authority. Otherwise, that's just your opinion. And if you want it to be agreed upon, you either have to garner enough votes or carry a big enough stick. Those are your options. See, if we want morality to be more than just political expediency, personal preference, social construct, there has to be a God. Let me give you another one. So, another way that we live like God exists, but we pretend that he doesn't, is that we want our lives to matter. And see, without God, your life, I have bad news for you, it has no real meaning. I mean, you can try to tell yourself it has meaning, but it's just an illusion. Because the very fact that you're here right now, like that actually had nothing to do with you. Not really. This was a course of action that was set in motion by the Big Bang, again, going back to the very, very beginning, right? It exploded, impersonal, cold chance. And it set everything in motion, and all of this, all of you, was predetermined. There is no real sense of you, right? The idea of you being who you are in all your unique ways, like your personality, all of that, it's not really you. It's just an illusion. It's just your genetic material. It's just your DNA. Like choice is just an illusion. Your choices, that was determined billions and billions of years ago. All of this has been playing out for billions of years for us to be right here. All that we feel that is meaningful in life, that matters in life, all of it is just an illusion. Your sense of self is an illusion. Your choices are an illusion. Love is an illusion. See, next time you want to tell somebody that you love them, just keep in mind that without God, that emotion that you have for them, it is just an illusion. That is just a product of your genetic makeup. It is the chemicals in your body and in your brain and the synapses firing that leads you to feel this emotion towards them, but it has no real meaning. It's just the evolutionary forces inside of you telling you that you should feel that way towards this person in order to pass on your genetic material. That's it. So just try telling yourself that and see if you believe it. Or try telling it to that person, see how that goes. When I was an undergrad studying philosophy at Northwestern, I had the opportunity to work with some really, really brilliant people and way smarter than me. And one of the guys I got to work with, he was actually a doctoral student at the university, and he was like super bright, and he was and is a believer, as best I know. And so he was a Christian, and so I was like, you don't find a lot of philosophy majors or PhD students at Northwestern who are Christians. And so I met him, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. Want to get to know this guy. And he was really bright. He already had a degree in physics from Yale, then he come to Northwestern and was studying philosophy to get his PhD. And so I'm having this conversation with him, and I got to ask him, I said, okay, I'm just curious. Like, you got this background in physics and science, and then now you're studying philosophy. Not a lot of you around, so why do you believe in God? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, because I believe that love is real. And if I believe that love is real, then God has to be real. Amen. See, if the God of the scriptures, see, we're not talking about, I'm going to move on, I'm going to cheat right now, all right? I'm going to move on, we're in a church, Christian, all right, so I'm going to cheat, I'm going to bring out the God of the Bible. Not just talking about some impersonal God out there somewhere. Could have made some of those arguments for any God, but now I want to get to the Christian God, the God of the scriptures. If the God of the scriptures is real, then understand that love is the most real thing in the universe, because God is love. He is the one who created the whole of the universe out of love. Love was what motivated him. It was the creative impulse of God from the very beginning to create all of the universe and all of us. Love is the most real thing in the world. But without God, understand that when you break down all the way back to what the universe is, all you are left with is physics. And you might like physics, but you will spend your whole life searching for love. And that should tell you something. I said at the very beginning, I can't prove to you that God exists. But we still live like he does. Like you might even believe in God, but you live like he does. You live like your life and relationships and decisions matter, because they do. You live like there's right and wrong, because there is. We live like God is real. We can't help ourselves. And so you might not believe in God, but you can't escape him. C.S. Lewis, in his book, Surprised by Joy, he makes this really interesting observation when it comes to, he wasn't applying it specifically in this way, but when you think about our relationship with God, understand that God exists outside of our time and space. And so C.S. Lewis, he observes that our finding God, if you will, would sort of be like Hamlet trying to find Shakespeare. That for Hamlet to prove that Shakespeare exists would be less trying to prove that God exists. And so he concludes this way. He says, if Shakespeare and Hamlet could ever meet, it must be Shakespeare's doing. Hamlet could initiate nothing. In other words, the only way for Hamlet to prove that Shakespeare's real, the only way for him to know Shakespeare, the only way for him to really meet and to find Shakespeare would be if Shakespeare wrote himself into the play. Can you imagine? To be or not to be. That is the question. And then here's Shakespeare. I got an answer for you. Really weird, right? I mean, like here's the author, and let me introduce myself to you. I created you, Hamlet. But see, that's exactly what God did. God said, I want you to know me. I want to meet you, and I want you to meet me. And God wrote himself into the story. Romans 1:16, right before, I've been sort of working my way backwards, right before the passage we've looked at, Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. Understand that the gospel is the good news, that God wrote himself into our story. That when we were lost because of sin and broken, when we were living a lie, that God wrote himself into the story to rescue us from the lie, to rescue us from our delusions of self-grandeur, to free us from sin and death. You will spend your whole life searching for love. But Jesus, he came searching for you. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you that you have revealed yourself in so many ways. Thank you for nature and creation and the universe, and we get to see, as Steve was talking about earlier, just your artistry at work and the beauty all around us. And yet, Lord, the reality is that all of us, to some degree, we want to believe that we can live without you. We want to believe that we don't need you. And when we believe that enough, we can lose the ability to recognize you at all, to even see that you exist. Lord, if there's anyone here right now, and maybe they are wrestling with doubts, maybe they're wondering, could any of this actually be true? Lord, I just pray that you would begin to reveal yourself to them. Lord, the reality is that ultimately, it's not about arguments. It's not about what we can prove and evidence. It really is about an encounter with you. And so, Lord, I pray that they would encounter you, that you would write yourself into their story in a way that is undeniable. Lord, I pray for us today, whether we are struggling with belief, whether we're just mildly curious in belief, or whether we know we have encountered you, we believe in you, Lord, wherever we are on that journey, Lord, help us to go one more step. Lead us that more further towards really understanding and knowing who you are and what that means in our lives. Lord, we pray this in your name. Amen.